What's the most fireable thing someone has done but they kept the job? Chef used to shoot up in the disabled toilets. Regularly stole alcohol from the bar. Had the restaurant closed for a police raid and all staff searched. Manager decided it was easier to wait for him to go to jail. Best chef there and only one that spoke English. Still not in jail. I worked in a call center where a co-worker got caught. Not once but twice. For masturbating at his desk when speaking with female customers. HR spoke with him about it. Everyone knew what he had done but they just kept him on regardless. If he can close. A teacher I had in secondary school decided not to come to class and instead go smoke weed behind the school. He was caught by the vice principal. Sent to class high as a kite. And proceeded to tell the class he's most likely getting fired. It's our fault and we're all a bunch of CNTS. He didn't get fired. Somehow. Guy comes into the office on a Saturday. Office is empty. Makes a point of wearing a hoodie and baseball hat so he won't be recognized on camera. Digs around someone's desk until he finds a key to secured computer room. Enters room and steals computer. Was caught and asked to apologize. I was dumbfounded that he wasn't fired until I learned he was personally hired by the CEO many years ago. A good friend of mine works at a dealership where he drives cars on a daily basis. He was doing a bunch of pre-delivery inspections at the end of his shift about a month ago now. He was test driving a brand new, fully loaded Jeep Wrangler. He looked down to set the cruise and make sure the heater works as it should. When he looked up, he had no time to react before slamming into the back of a Ford Escape and sending it flying. No one was hurt. Luckily. But both vehicles totaled. The kicker of the story? He hasn't had a license in over a year. He lied to all of his bosses about it and was persistent that he had a license. I just had him change my oil today. Actually. Still working full time. Just not allowed to drive vehicles. Friend bought a new Volvo. Dealer says it has sensors that won't allow it to drive into things. It will stop. Test drive. Dealer hit that brick wall. Really? Yeah. Car won't let you. Okay. Drives at wall. Slam. Dealer. Shit. I forgot to enable that feature. Customer comes into shipping service 15 minutes before closing. Customer spills a fair amount of liquid mercury in the lobby. Supervisor sees spill and leaves it. Closing the shop up on time. Supervisor tells no one. Morning custodian attempts to mop up the liquid mercury, making an even bigger mess. Hazmat team is called. They clean the building. Take several pair of shoes. And charge us something like 40k. Nothing is done to supervisor. I heard this from a coworker. As it happened before I started working at the office. Apparently one of the employees was discovered to be hosting and profiting from pornographic websites, which he was hosting on the company's servers. He was not immediately fired. The owners politely asked him to stop. He was only fired after he refused to stop. So there was this guy. A real high up guy in the organization. Sort of like a regional head position. He was in the middle of a sexual harassment lawsuit that he was 1000% definitely going to lose. He had straight up told a woman that she would have to have sex with him in order to keep her job and get a raise. And he had said so in email. There has never been a more clear-cut case of sexual harassment in the history of sexual harassment. Company was gonna have to pay out the big bucks on this one. Not only was this guy not fired until the absolute bitter end, but he was actually invited to be the friggin' keynote speaker at the organization's women's conference right in the middle of all this. How does one even justify that? Personal banker at a major institution that rhymes with Felswargo. Lied to clients about terms of accounts. Forged client signatures on credit card applications. Opened accounts without client's permission. I called the confidential tip line. Twice. But 8 months later when I left, he still had a job. We have one woman who calls in sick for 7/10 shifts. When she finally got in trouble for it, she brought in a doctor's note that was too illegible to actually read. Scrawled on what looked like scrap paper. HR still accepted it. She then has the audacity to come in shopping on days she's called in sick. A doctor's note that was too illegible to actually read. Sounds legit to me. A guy at the company I used to work for allegedly left the gate switches on an elevator, jumped out. Basically the circuit that tells it not to move while the door's open. Kind of one of the worst things you can do in my trade, as it can literally result in a person being cut in half. Fear of elevators. Threw up a little reading this. I have a co-worker who constantly drafts close to $100k from the wrong customer accounts almost weekly. She's still here. F King Comcast. Throwing a $40,000 piece of equipment in the dumpster because he thought it was trash. And then shutting his phone off so our professor can't reach him and has to call me in the middle of the night to tell me to go dumpster diving. F King Grad School. One time my old boss erroneously ordered an entire tractor trailer full of cardboard boxes. These are stored flat. Mind you. So that is an unholy F ton of cardboard boxes for a small company like us. $20,000 worth. 2 years later we still have most of them. He kept the job until he quit for a new one, where he was fired after a couple months for drinking at work. He used to drink at work almost every day when he worked at my company too. So nobody was really surprised that he was responsible for what became known as box gut. The CEO at my former company had an affair with one of our clients. His wife found scandalous emails between him and the other chick and sent them to all that. Made for a fun next morning. I love this. As a disgruntled cube dweller, this would have made my year. A dude I worked with at Sbarro back in the day informed me, a cashier pizza maker, on his second day of work, that he lied about his criminal history on his employment application and that he had served time in jail for attempted murder, accessory to murder and arson. And showed me a local news article on his phone about a local student who was murdered. The charred body was found with bullets. I told my manager that night after he went home. He decided not to fire him because he was afraid he would murder him and his family. Probably would have. Ultimately fired about a week later by a regional manager for stealing spaghetti. Edit. As someone pointed out, attempted murder doesn't make sense since the dude died. It was accessory to murder. My boss contacted my therapist and inquired about the content of my sessions. I called HR when my therapist told me what happened. She denied she did that even though my therapist had an email from her. HR flipped. And nothing happened. I'm still stuck working for the rude bitch 7 years later. I worked at a Denny's restaurant years ago. We had an HIV plus employee. He once cut his thumb with a knife and stuck his entire hand directly into the commercial ice machine in the kitchen. I was absolutely horrified at what had just happened. And immediately told my manager. The ice machine had to be emptied and professionally sanitized. The ice contaminator never lost his job. Never even really got talked to about what happened. HIV or not. What he did was awful. Never have I seen something so unsanitary at any job I've had to date. Which goddamn Denny's was that at? I just posted this in the weirdest thing a guy has done to you thread, but it also applies here. When I was 15 I worked at an amusement park and we had a sheet with all the employees' phone numbers on it so people could ask each other covers. There was a 17-year-old who worked there who took my number and then texted me his detailed plans to pay me. Told the people who owned the park and they didn't care, so I changed my number and got a new job. Edit. No, I didn't go to the police. I was 15 at the time and just wanted to get myself out of the situation. I was afraid if I went to the police I would be stuck dealing with this guy for a long time and afraid of what people would say about me. If it happened to me now I would go to the police, but I wasn't ready to deal with that at 15. This took place in the military and this douche we shall call Duffy is lucky to even get off easy. One holiday Duffy was going out of town and asked a co-worker to watch his place and dog. The person watching the dog was doing a horrible job, so I took over. There was poop all over his carpet and the dog tore up some furniture too. While assessing his place, I noticed something on his desk. He had 2 monitors with yellow stickers on them. TSC. So he took these from work. We'll talk about that later. Also on his desk there were 5 hard drives with the same sticker. He took classified information out of a secure environment and took it home. All that happened to him was a slap on the wrist and leadership trying to keep it quiet since they knew it would ruin his life if it got out. We had an employee yelling at the owner of the company while the owner was in a meeting with out-of-town clients to stop whining like a little baby and stop acting like a little bitch. Sounds like the owner is a little bitch if he didn't fire that FK for his public insubordination. Had a nurse co-worker choke me around the neck and slam me up against the wall one time. I informed my boss and nothing was done. Myself and my other co-workers were all pretty sure from that and other incidents that she had some kind of blackmail on our boss. Guy at work got mad at a printer and smashed it. There were meetings with managers. Meetings with peers. Anger management policy reviews. HR was involved. The case was formally documented and the punishment was meted out. Until further notice, the guy was no longer allowed to use that printer. I am a nurse practitioner. My first job out of school was working for a doctor and her one office manager, who had a vendetta against me because I made more money than her. Anyway, this bitch was openly rude to all of my patients when they came in for appointments or called the office. She refused to room and vital my patients. Only the doctors. Went on Facebook calling our boss a f-king dyke bitch and calling other people homophobic slurs. When I brought this all up to our boss, it was turned into what do you have against office manager. Not only was I never stuck up for, I was made to feel like I was the problem for being the new employee. I put up with this for far too long before finally leaving that practice. I've never seen such unprofessionalism go unpunished. I'm pretty sure our boss was doing something illegal with her business taxes. And the office manager was the bookkeeper. So that's probably why she kept her job. She has since left that job and lasted at her new one for about 1 month. Don't think she's working anymore. I had an employee not show up to work for 9 months. HR said we could not fire him. I am a government employee. Edit. More info. Since it seems Reddit is wondering. This male employee was a routine abuser of sick leave. He exhausted all of his paid leave, then just did not come to work or call in. His time card was coded AWOL. Left a Nokia prototype phone, running Symbian, on the table in a pub while drinking, where it was promptly stolen, never to be seen again. He kept his job. And in fact still kept it when the office was closed about a year later and almost the entire staff team was made redundant. We do oil changes on cars at my job and my co-worker forgets to put the oil cap back on the car. Time and time again. This has happened a number of times. I have no idea how he still has a job or even remembers how to breathe. Among other things. He threw a battery on the ground after taking it out of the car and left it there, leaking battery acid, for the morning crew to come in and find. I broke my boss's nose when I was 16. Punched him right in the snout. It was an accident and I never felt worse at work. His wife came in a few days later and thanked me because he stopped snoring. Not sure if she said that to make me feel better, but it kind of made me feel better. A doctor tries to resuscitate a patient on an operating table before the patient's surgery started. He then called the time of death and left the room. A nurse in the room then happened to check for a pulse and noticed that there was one. He spoke up, alerting everyone still in the room that the patient was still alive. The anesthesiologist was against further resuscitation because the time of death was already called. The patient barely lived. Thanks to the nurse catching the pulse. The anesthesiologist didn't even so much as get a warning. This was at a VA hospital. My co-worker is super nosy and looked at some confidential documents on my boss's desk that had everyone's pay on it. She told a few people who made what? Word got around. And he didn't fire her or write her up. She also gossips with customers who come in and will go shopping next door during work hours. She is my boss's assistant and there are only 3 of us that work in this office, not including the others, here including myself. Basically he is desperate and keeps her around so he doesn't have to be here or work often. My friend got drunk at the Christmas party and told his boss that he is a CNT with no morals. Who deserves to get syphilis or AIDS or whatever? I don't know. FCK off. My second shift team leader grabbed a bottle of hand lotion and flipped the lid open. He approached a busty co-worker and made grunting sounds and sprayed hand lotion all over her chest. He's still there but I quit 3 years ago. A co-worker while being written up in the HR office, with HR lady present. I ain't your goddamned. How he kept his job I'll never know. A supervisor in another department recently screamed at one of our employees until she cried. The employee was about 8 months pregnant at the time. The offense? Using the restroom while it was being cleaned. This same sup has also gotten in an employee's face. Interrupted a meeting by slamming folders down on another sup's desk. And yelled at various other employees. Damn. Let the pregnant lady pee. Being caught masturbating. Not even in the bathroom but right there in the cubicle while staring at the office hottie. It helps when your cousin is the project manager. That's not how a project manager would run it. If you look at 100 pictures of hot women at the same time you'll come 100x faster. This project manager needs to learn how to fast track. I yelled at my boss and I quote, "Your bullshit is the reason our office is going down the f-king drain. So stop f-king up." The next day I was brought before the Grams. He read my write-up aloud to me, while trying not to laugh and smirk the whole time. Then he sent me home for the rest of the day, and told me to have a nice day and we'll see you tomorrow. All while still smiling. Guy got caught with kiddie PRN on his work computer. But because they didn't remove him from the building according to policy, he was able to keep his job. They gave him the option to work from home. So he took it. So now the government of Canada is paying $70k a year for a pedophile who stays at home. I work in a butcher shop at the present time. Older butcher talks about a time when he worked at a grocery store in his younger years. He requested a day off months in advance and was told last minute that he had to work. So he ground up a whole box of beef tenderloins, the cut that becomes fillets. That's about $1,200, $1,500 worth of beef straight into the garbage. He worked there for years after that incident. When I worked in leisure, one of our lifeguards took a shitty in one of the bins at the center I worked at. His excuse was that he wanted to make sure the cleaners changed the bins. I work at a women's prison. Female officer becomes friends with inmate Jones even though that's a big no-no. Officer brings inmate Jones a cupcake for her birthday. An even bigger no-no. She gets moved from one area where she was working alone to an area with other officers. Couple months later they need her to cover a different work alone area. Guess who keeps showing up at the new area to visit? Inmate Jones. Now female officers being watched again. But not fired yet. Manager at work has, while drunk, made 5 SZUL advances on young waitresses. However, his brother is porking the owner so he's kept his job despite running the whole restaurant like a lemonade stand. My experience in food service led me to suspect that a manager could get fired for not making SZUL advances on young waitresses. A former co-worker of mine really wanted to have sex with this one girl who was another co-worker. He stalked her like crazy and actually wrote up a SZUL intercourse contract for her to sign. Some 50 shades of grey like shitty. He also kept telling her all of these SZUL and vulgar things that he wanted to do to her. My former boss got word of all this nonsense and had a little chat with the guy. Turns out, despite committing SZUL harassment, he did not get fired. My former boss just kept them on separate shifts so they wouldn't work together, although that didn't last too long, as my boss forgot about the whole thing a few months after. The girl co-worker quit that job about 6 months later. The guy co-worker actually got promoted as a manager about 8 months later. Nodding out while talking to me in the middle of our shift while being trained. I have a government job and we have people who work here and literally do nothing. I mean, literally nothing. We have a guy who shows up 3 hours late, leaves 3 hours early, does nothing but talk on the phone here, makes inappropriate jokes and interrupts us all from our work. He only comes in maybe once a week or twice. He makes $45K of your tax money.